Hello everyone. We will start the first session of the 8th workshop RIS 2022. Now I will explain the timing of this session. The speaker will have 15 minutes for the presentations. When the speaker has 5 minutes remaining, I will notify them. Okay? The same with 2 minutes remaining. And when the time is finished, I will show the stop things. Okay? Okay? The first talk will be carried out by Debón from the Universitat Politécnica de Valencia.
This work is in collaboration with David Atance he works at the Universidad Alcalá de Henares, and I work at the Universitat Politécnica de Valencia. The title of this talk is Two Multi-Population Mortality Models, a comparison of the forecasting accuracy with resampling methods. The plan of this talk is firstly an introduction, secondly a brief methodology, the two multi-population models that we are going to apply, and the methods to compare the results of these models, specifically leave one out cross-validation. And after that, we are going to apply this model and methods to mortality data of Spanish regions. The results of this application, brief conclusions, and finally the references, important references that are used in this work. Let's start with the introduction. The motivation of this talk is to use or to explain tools to measure the accuracy of the fitting and prediction, especially the prediction of mortality from a group of countries or regions that belong a large population. Especially, we are going to consider two variants of the well-known and classical Lee-Carter model. One proposal was done in 2011 by Rusolillo et al. This proposal adds this region effect in a multiplicative way. And second, we are going to consider my own proposal in 2011 that modifies this region introduction, this effect in an additive way, which is a little bit more simple. The objective of this study is to use resampling method, machine learning techniques, to compare or to evaluate the prediction of these two multi-population models, mortality models. The methodology, as we mentioned before, are two multi-mortality models, multi-population mortality models, and just one resampling method, this one out cross-validation. The first proposed model is in the paper of Rusolillo et al. In 2011, and is in this equation, equation 1, and as you can see, we have two age-dependent parameters, one time-dependent parameter, as Lee-Carter classical model, but we add a region effect, the parameter A, multiplying B and K. These new region effects represent the differences in mortality among regions. The second proposal, it's in equation 2. If you compare with the previous model, you can see that the region effect now, it's in additive way, but you have the same number of parameters of the above or the previous model. That's not difficult comparison for the reason, and it's a simple study. It's not very, it's not, because we are focused on the resampling methods. And details of both models and others are in Debón et al. 2011. The leave one out cross validation scheme is presented in this slide, and it means that you have to fix some periods at the beginning of the sample. You just predict 1 year ahead, and the remaining sample, it's omitted in this prediction. The following iteration means that you have to add 1 year to the fitted period at the beginning and just predict 1 year ahead. And this is a recursive procedure that you repeat at the end of the sample. The application of these two models and just one resampling method is going to be carried out using mortality data of Spanish regions, and we are going to present the results. We have to say that we are going to use free database that you can download, and we are going to use free software that you can download. That is very important for the replication and reproducibility of this research according to the previous talk. Tony, thank you for your introduction. And that's in line with my opinion about results have to be in an increasing knowledge for the future. That means that the source of our mortality data are from the Spanish National Institute, and the life tables are downloaded with the R package PCXs. That is the format that the Spanish National Institute used. And it was fitted using our software. Life tables are in an abridged way. They are called abridged life table, which means that age rates, it's in age groups, 5-year groups, and time range from 1991 to 2020, and we are going to use just only 17 regions of the 19 Spanish regions. We are not going to use Ceuta and Melilla because they a small population size. The step of the list one out cross validation method means that we are going to set the first 10 years at the beginning of the period, from 1991 to 2000 for training the model, and the two population models in equation 1 and 2 are going to be fitted to all the regions in that period. Then we are going to project using ARIMA models the KT parameter just to predict 1 year ahead for all ages in all regions. And this procedure is repeated 20 times to predict the last year of the sample, who was 2020. After this, after the prediction of KT parameter, we can obtain the prediction of the probability of death of all the ages, and we can in the next iteration add this year and predict the following year. When we arrive the prediction of the 20 years, we can obtain the goodness of fit measure, that here is the root of the mean square error, RMSE, as global measure of the forecasting accuracy. Here in this table is shown the results of this goodness of fit measure for all the regions, including Spain, and we can compare the additive and multiplicative models. As you can see, more or less, because it's not so much clear, because it was shown in boldface, but it's not very clear here, but additive model gave better results than multiplicative in most of the regions. And of course, in the global measure for both genders. If we compare these results in a graphical way, you can see that additive model is below multiplicative in most of ages, and especially for all ages, in the case of males and in the case of females. Then the conclusion of this study were that this paper shown how a specific kind of resample method, it's called leave one out cross validation. It's a proper technique to decide which multi-population mortality model produce the best forecasting accuracy. This paper compared these two multi-population mortality models using this method, this one-out cross-validation, and shows which model produced the best forecasting outcomes. And the outcomes have shown that there are few differences between models, are not very big, but although these results, the global measure of accuracy is better for the additive mortality models for both genders, and the precision is also better for all ages, which is interesting for insurance companies. References used in this study are these, and thank you for your attention. Muchas gracias, moltes gràcies, and if you have some questions, it will be a pleasure to me to answer them face-to-face or by email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we only had time for one question, please. Can we go a bit late? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. I come back.
Finally, we have microphone.
Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. I had a basic question about your initial formulas for the two models. Yes, I think there. For instance, there you have stochastic noise. Do you? I don't know the model. So do you have any correlation structure of your epsilon between the regions or not? You see the question? So we could expect some correlation. For instance, let's imagine COVID, for instance. Okay, so we could imagine some correlation of noises between the subpopulation.
That's the hypothesis behind of that A and B age-dependent parameters are common to all the regions.
But the
more or
epsilon,
less.
the noises, the stochastic
Yeah,
part
yeah.
are independent, I can imagine. Have a structure of independent
it's
noises.
quite common. It's quite common.
Yeah, okay, it's just a
in
question,
Ricardo-
yeah.
Yeah. We didn't analyze these kind of things because we are focused on the prediction.
Okay.
In machine learning methods, I don't want to say a lot of things, but we analyze this in not in very statistical way. Yeah, you are right, totally right. But we focus more in prediction than in the validation of the models.
Okay, thank you.
That's the hypothesis behind this.
Okay.
Thank you for your question.
The second talk will be carried out by Fadua Zeddouk from the Universitat Catholic of Louvain.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here today to talk about our working paper, longevity-linked securities, pricing in the presence of population basis risk, and this is a joint work with Professor Pierre Devolder. So this is the outline of the presentation. After the introduction, I'll talk about mortality modeling, then I'll give an overview of the pricing approach. Afterwards, I will focus on the longevity basis risk and how to hedge it. Then I will give a numerical illustration and finally conclude. So let's start with the definition of the longevity risk. So longevity risk is the risk that annuitants and beneficiaries live longer than expected, and it can be broken down into three types of risks. So the first one is the unsystematic longevity risk, which refers to a possible adverse development of the policyholder's longevity. And this risk can be eliminated by increasing the portfolio size, and therefore the insurer can benefit from diversification through the law of large numbers. The second one is the systematic longevity risk, which refers to the risk associated with the overall mortality improvement across the whole population. But this risk cannot be diversified. Then we have the residual systematic longevity risk that we also call the basis risk. And this risk refers to the difference in terms of longevity between a reference population and a sub-population. And in this case, it will be the insurer's population. And here also this risk cannot be diversified. So to cover these two risks, the insurer can resort to a reinsurer who can propose some hedging solutions, but this transaction has become increasingly expensive and an important credit risk. And because these two risks cannot be diversified, just few reinsurance companies really have the capacity to take it. So we need an alternative solution. And this can be transferring the systematic risk to the capital market through securitization using longevity-linked securities, and transferring the basis risk to the reinsurer, for instance, using a customized product. And actually, some longevity-linked securities have been launched in the financial market, but it wasn't a success. And that was mainly because of pricing difficulties. So we need a pricing method to price these longevity-linked securities that is consistent with Solvency II. This is very important. So this is the main purpose of the paper. And to do so, we first need a good mortality model able to accurately forecast mortality. And because here we focus on the basis risk, so we need a two-population mortality model. And we need a pricing framework to price longevity-linked securities, such as survival forward contracts or survival swaps, that is consistent with Solvency II. And once we have that, we can assess longevity basis risk by associating it to a new product that we introduce and price using our Solvency II consistent approach, and therefore we can price also different types of longevity-linked securities. So let's start with the first step, mortality modeling. Different multi-population models and multi-cohort models have been proposed in the literature, and the majority of these models were based on discrete time stochastic mortality models, such as the Lee-Carter model. So we have just seen that in the presentation before. So a variant or an extension of the Lee Carter model. And in our setting, we don't only need a good mortality model able to accurately forecast mortality, but it also should be easy to use and flexible to price different types of longevity-linked securities. So we have only focused on continuous time stochastic models, and we have compared between different continuous time mortality models, and that was the subject of another paper entitled Mean Reverting Stochastic Mortality, Why and How. So for more details, I invite you to have a look at it. But the winner of this comparison was the whole and white model, and this is why we have used it here for the reference population, as well as for the insurance population mortality. Of course, the two models are different. We have different parameters. And as a target, we have used the compared model that was also discussed in detail in the paper. And we introduced the mortality spread, which is the difference between the reference population mortality and the insurance population mortality. The independence assumption is a standard hypothesis that you also find in the literature, and which consists in supposing the independence between the spread and the reference population mortality, and this is the formula of the spread. And if we have this condition here satisfied, this means that theta and mu x are dependent, and therefore this is the new formula for the insurance population mortality. And notice here that the two Brownian motions are independent. In our setting, we didn't want to impose this condition. We wanted to be more general, and this is the formula that we propose for the insurance population mortality, and we consider B prime B are equal, A prime is equal to J times A, and sigma hat is equal to alpha times sigma, where the two J and alpha are positive numbers, and here the two Brownian motions can be correlated. Let's now move to the pricing approach, and this is the definition of the survival index, which represents the index at time t of an individual initially aged X alive at time t to survive until time capital T. And because, so we have this formula, so the survival probability is obtained by taking the expectation of the survival index, and since here we have a wholly white model, which is a fine process, so it can also be written as given by this formula with alpha and beta are two deterministic functions. As I have mentioned in the introduction, longevity-linked securities were not widely traded in the financial market, mainly due to pricing challenges. And actually, some classical pricing approaches are used in finance to price financial derivatives, such as the risk-neutral Sharpe ratio and Wang transform. But these methods need an important amount of data for calibration. They are not necessarily consistent with Solvency II. So we need a new method that is based on Solvency II and that is doesn't need an important amount of data for calibration. And under Solvency II, insurance liabilities that cannot be hedged are computed as the sum of a best estimate and the risk margin. And this risk margin is determined by the cost of capital approach based on the future successive SCR. So the capital required to cover with 99.5% probability in expected losses on a 1-year time horizon. And the risk margin at time zero is based on the sum of the SCR estimated at time zero, where C here is the cost of capital rate, fixed now to 6%. So this is given by the regulator. And P is the risk-free discount factor. And we can use this approach to price different types of longevity-linked securities, such as the survival forward, which is an agreement to exchange at a future date t an amount equal to the realized survival rate of a given population in return for a fixed survival rate. And this is the payoff of the contract, so the difference between the realized survival index and the fixed rate. And more specifically, we can price the survival exchange contract that we also call here the S exchange contract, whose the payoff is given by the difference between the survival index related to the insurance population and the reference population. And by associating the basis risk to this product and pricing this product under the cost of capital approach, we can get the price of the basis risk. And finally, this is the price of the S exchange contract at time 0 under the cost of capital approach using the hollow white model that we have seen together, where phi, psi, and xi are positive numbers. Okay, so now that we have priced survival forward contracts and S exchange contract, we can propose different hedging strategies to the insurer who can choose from according to his risk appetite. So he can choose a no hedging strategy, which means he enters no contract, just hold the SCR, or he can choose a partial hedging. So this means that he can enter an S forward contract and hold just the SCR corresponding to the basis risk. He can also choose a full hedging strategy, which means he can enter an S forward contract as well as the S exchange contract, and therefore he is fully covered, or he can resort directly to the insurer who can take care of the risk. So this is an example. So we have the case of an insurer with a portfolio of pure endowment paying €1 at maturity. So we have portfolio of 10,000 policy holders, age 65 or 70 years old in 2015. We use projected unisex data for Belgian population. The interest rate is fixed to 1%. And here for the insurer's population mortality, we use the whole white model that we have proposed using these following parameters. And this table represents the prices, the different SCR corresponding to each hedging strategy. So here, for instance, for this strategy, so no hedging, so there's no price because the insurer enters no contract, so he has just to hold the SCR to cover the longevity risk. For S2, the partial hedging, so this is the price that he has to pay for the S forward contract, and he has to hold the SCR related only to the basis risk. Or here he can pay this amount by buying the S forward as well as an S exchange contract, and therefore no SCR to hold. So to conclude, we have seen that the whole white model is a good mortality model, able to forecast mortality, but also flexible and easy to use to price longevity-linked securities that can be extended to be a multi-population model. The cost of capital approach and new method allows us pricing different types of longevity-linked securities while being consistent with Solvency II. And the basis risk can be associated to another product that also can be priced under the cost of capital approach. And this is all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for your attention. And some references. Thank you.
Okay, now one question can be two. Okay, some.
So, does it exist the SC contract, the S exchange, and the S forward?
Yeah, there was some attempts. They tried to launch some product, but as I said, it wasn't a success. Now there's no product in the market. The S exchange contract is a customized product, so because of transparency, such product cannot be in the financial markets. But to answer your question, no, for now, no product in the market, I guess.
Okay, some more questions? Yeah? Yeah?
We've seen your approach is very different to what we just saw before in the paper before.
Yes.
That's a personal opinion, but how would this can you comment a bit more with irregularities in the mortality information that we have seen recently and still see in this country? Can you comment a little bit how this could impact? How do you expect this to impact?
The longevity products.
Yes.
Well, as I said,
Can you repeat? Yes.
For other people.
Your question.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if I understood correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. So your question is how can this work can affect the current situation? So the mortality, especially after COVID, yeah. So as I said, now because mortality or longevity is increasing, so reinsurance companies don't have the capacity to take the longevity risk now, especially now that after COVID. So this product, if we can launch this product and we can try this product, this can be helpful because in the financial markets, there are investors who can be interested in buying these products for diversification. So I think this is the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Then the third talk will be carried out by Carole Bernat from the Grenoble École de Management.
Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for organizing this nice workshop. So I'm going to present this joint work with my PhD student, Steven's PhD student. I'm slightly involved in his in the supervision, Marco Feliciangeli, and Steven Vanduffel is a professor at VUB in Brussels. I need the... Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you. So I'll be talking about first what is a tontine. It's about tontines, and not everyone is familiar with that. Trying to convince you that these are the best products ever. And then we'll look at how to share money within a tontine. And there is one rule that is actually very interesting, which we call the Sabine rule, that has good properties and bad properties that led us to investigate other tontines, like the École utility tontine. But at the end, in a competitive market, what we find is that only the Sabine rule will stay and will be valid. So let me explain what is a tontine and try to convince every one of you to invest, and then probably we'll get a better deal afterwards. So this is a collective investment. We put money together, and only participants who will survive to the maturity will earn some money. The others will actually leave the money to the fund. So this product exists. So in France, there is one company offering this for 10 years or 25 years. So you give money to this company, and you just, if you are alive in 10 years, you'll get something. If you're dead, too bad, you won't get anything. But somebody in the tontine will get it. And this is the advantage, is that you get more than what you would get if you invest alone. And the only problem is like you don't get money when you're dead. But for some people, it doesn't really matter. And for many of us, it doesn't really matter. So let me give you the simplest case, which is the homogeneous case, where everybody invests the same amount, C0. And we assume that there's NS survivors, ND deaths. And so what we have is C here is your initial investments growing with some interest rates. And so that's what you would get if you don't invest in the tontine. You would get this at maturity of your investments. Now, if you invest in the tontine, you have this mortality credit that you would get earning money from all the people who died in between. So ND is the number of people who died, C is their money, and so C and D is the amount of money to be shared, and you share it among all the survivors, so these NS survivors. So this is actually a very simple product. The only problem is like if you die, you don't get anything. But if you're ready to forget what you get after you die, then this is actually a really good product that allows you to get more than what you would get in a simple investment or in a simple bank account or a bond. So it's a one-period tontine. Maybe you find it's too simple, it's not an annuity, but actually just the one-period tontine is the element that you can then reproduce with different maturities and then create an annuity with that. And this is actually the model that is used currently with the French company that issues tontines. A more general one would mean that not everyone has the same mortality. So what I assume here is like everybody is actually homogeneous. They all have the same risk, and then we share equally among us. But in general, when you want to pool money, like some people will live longer than others, and this is something you may be able to predict, like we've discussed before. So if you can predict it, then it's unfair to just share equally. And so you need to come up with a rule to share the money at the end that makes it fair. And so what we have, this is your initial investment, and we have this kappa I, which will be the sharing rule. This is the money to be shared, and everyone will have kind of a kappa I, and depending on how big is your kappa I, you'll get a bigger portion of the money coming from the deaf participants. What's interesting with this design is that as long as you get your initial investment accrued with interest rate, plus that your kappa I is positive, then you'll get better off by investing in a tontine than investing in a bank account, as long as you don't have bequest motives. So this is what we prove here, but it's actually completely trivial. The payout of a tontine strictly dominates the payout of an investment in a risk-free investment, in the sense of first order stochastic dominance, just because you get more. You get more than if you invest in a risk-free rate, just because you get the money, the mortality credit from the others. And so what do we assume about this sharing rule? How do we share the money coming from the people who died in between? First thing, and this is actually part of one article in the French law, is that this amount of money must be proportional to the amount of money you invested. So if you invest twice as much as me and we have the same mortality risk, you should actually get twice as much at the end. And so this proportionality helps to simplify a little bit the sharing rule and then factorize the amount of money you get to get a sharing rule here that now only depends on your mortality. So it's proportional to your investment and it just depends on your mortality. And what we assume is that people who have a higher chance of dying are taking more risk. If you take more risk, you want to be rewarded for it. So it makes sense to actually get more. So that's why these kappa I are decreasing with the survival probability of the IF participants. So the Sabine sharing rule was proposed in a working paper in 2010 and has been used a few times since then, is a very natural candidate where you put this kappa I that will help to share. So this percentage, or you can scale it to make it a percentage, but it doesn't matter because you cannot normalize it in any case by dividing by the sum of the kappa I. So this one depends on your probability to die and your probability to survive until the end of the tontine. And it has a nice property that it's almost, at least when there's enough people signing up in the tontine, it's almost actuarially fair. What do we mean by actuarially fair? It means that when you invest in the fund, on average, you get back your initial investment, or the return normalized by the interest rate will be 1. So everybody investing in the fund is equal in expectation. You get equal expected return in some sense. You all get the risk-free rate in this case. Advantage, so I said it before, and this is one of the motivations why we take this Sabine rule, is that it's asymptotically actually fair. And another way to show it is that if there's enough participants, investing in the tontine is the same as investing in a one-period life annuity, where you would get money when you survive. And so on II being 1, if you survive, on average you survive with probability P. So this is clearly the average of VI is just CI. So on average, you earn per unit of investment, you just earn 1 after assuming that the interest rate is 0. Another advantage, and that's why actually the Sabine rule is so powerful in a competitive market, is this one. So if you invest in a tontine with very different people, what you would like is that investing with many different people, many like older people, younger people, actually doesn't matter to you. Because one problem when you sign a tontine, and this is the case also with this French company who launched tontines, is they give you a contract, you have no way to know who has already signed up for the tontine. So you don't know if the people are old, if they are young, you don't know anything about it. The good thing about the Sabine rule is that, and that's one property of the Sabine rule, is that it's asymptotically indifferent to heterogeneous mortality. you're robust to heterogeneous mortality in the sense that if I tell you you can invest with people who have all your age in a tontine just for your age, or you invest in a tontine where I use this rule to share the money, actually it doesn't matter, you would get the same. And it's even better for you to pool with many people with other ages, just because of the law of large number. The more you are, the lower the variance of the payoff. And so you get to actually a better payout. So that's what you get asymptotically in the Sabin rule. The main drawback is that, yes, you are all equal in expectation, but if you think about expected utility, you won't have the same expected utility to enter in the tontine. In terms of variance, the risk is not the same. So when you invest in a tontine, you're into an actually fair tontine, you get same expectation but different risks. And so, is it good, is it not good? At first we thought this might not be desirable because people like to be treated equally and maybe to get the same risk exposure. So that's kind of unfair to have risks that are more volatile than others for the same price. So we came up with this, and then we did a small simulation where we put 10 cohorts, 10 groups of people from age 65 to age 74. We used some mortality tables from the Belgian country. And we look at a 10-year tontine, and we compute it. So these kappa I are computed based on the Sabin rule. And you could see that if you're younger, your percentage that you would get at the end, if you survive, this 5.7 is smaller than if you're older. So the older you are, the more you're entitled of a bigger percentage if you survive. We see that given that we have 10 groups of 100 participants, it's big enough to actually get one with like an accuracy of 3 digits. So I just reported one. The standard deviation are unfortunately not the same. And then this is what I was telling you, is like this is the problem with Sabin rule, is that young people have low volatility, old people have high volatility. So this looks like this is unfair. You all get the same expectation on average, but some people get a more volatile payoff. So what if you want an equal utility tontine? If you do this, the idea is to get every cohort, whatever your age is, having the same utility. You can solve this numerically because there's no theoretical solution, so that's the first problem. And when you solve it, sometimes you find that you get corner solution. So if you really want people equal utility, you end up giving no mortality credit to some people. And so this is an example with 2 cohorts only. So if you take 2 cohorts that are closer in age, like 70, 71, you can find a solution. If you take cohorts like one age 70, one age 80, you find in this example that, for instance, the optimal sharing rule would be that the 80 people get everything and then the 70 will get 0. So you get this problem of the kappa, this sharing rule, where one generation is subsidizing for the others. Is this desirable? I don't know. If it's really 0, then you don't even want to participate, because then it's better to just leave the money alone in a bank account, because if you don't get mortality credit for sure, then why would you invest with other people? So better to keep your money and then leave it to your estate. So you can add a constraint to make sure that your kappa I always stay positive. But even with the constraint, now it's optimal for you to subscribe. If there's only this tontine, it's still better than a bank account. But in a competitive market, and that will be my last result, in fact, in a competitive market, if you have the Sabin tontine and this equal utility tontine, the Sabin tontine is the only one that will stay. And the reason is that in the Sabin tontine, you are indifferent between being pooled with people with different age. In the equal utility tontine, some people are subsidizing to others. So very intuitive, the people who subsidize the others, they don't want to stay in this tontine, they are better off in the Sabin tontine. So they will leave the tontine. And at the end, only the people who benefit the most will stay, and it will become a single cohort Tontine, which is the same as a Sabine Tontine. So at the end, everybody is better off to actually optimally sign the Sabine Tontine. So to conclude, one-period Tontines are attractive to any investors as long as you don't have bequest motives because of this non-negative mortality credit. Necessary condition for a Tontine to exist in a competitive Tontine market is this indifference between being in a single cohort and in an heterogeneous one, and the Sabine rule is actually the only rule that satisfies this property. It does suffer from some unfairness, and then if you disagree with offering this Sabine rule and you want to offer something that you think is more fair, and then where you force some subsidization across generation, then you need to make it mandatory. Everybody needs to subscribe. You need no competition, like a monopolist situation. But in any case, it needs to be done by external intervention. If you do have this Sabine rule that exists on the market, then people should just sign up for this Sabine rule. So this is how I will finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then now we have time for one question. I think we have microphone. Is from people. Montse? No? Oh, okay. One moment.
Thanks for the talk. How big is this market? How many participants are there in France, and how much money do they invest?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's a very obscure. It's a very obscure question. And in Belgium,
It's forbidden.
No, it's not forbidden. The law makes it possible to launch a Tontine. So companies are allowed to do it, but they don't want to do it. Right. So for now, there is no Tontine in Belgium. And you think it won't?
It's forbidden.
You think it's forbidden? Okay.
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 I don't know here actually in Spain. Are there Tontines?
No.
But they are not forbidden. Okay. I think in Belgium it's still feasible to open it.
Very special condition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Thank you. The fourth talk will be carried out by Amanda Fernández-Fontelo from the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona.
Today I'm here to present a joint work with Pere Puig, who is also from Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona, and Montse, Guillén, and David Morin, who are from Universitat de Barcelona. So I'm going to start with a brief description of the motivation, model details, and how we estimate model parameters. And finally, I will show some preliminary results, because this is really an ongoing project and we got the data like some weeks ago, so we are now just fighting with our data, so we don't have anything like really substantial, just some insights. So, well, first of all, I'm gonna just more or less describe what is misreporting. So misreporting in data is something which is very common, and it's like an event that affects quality data and can be like in the form of underreporting or overreporting. It means that underreporting, you observe less than what actually is happening, and the other way around is overreporting. You have an excess of cases or instances compared to the reality. So this is of course related to data quality, and of course data quality, if we don't have really good data quality, then of course our inferences, our conclusions can be really disaster. So what means that? If we have misreporting in data, what can happen? For instance, so we can have biased inferences, and depending on the intensity of this misreporting, this biasness in our inferences, in our estimates, can be really dramatic, and our conclusions can be really unrealistic. So it's something that we have to take into account. And there are a lot of examples, real-world data examples, where we have or underreporting, overreporting. Underreporting is really much more common because it's like really complicated to observe. I don't know, if we are talking about a disease or if we are talking about a specific process, it's really complicated to observe all the cases, but sometimes we also have over-reporting in some examples, as in ADHD, which is I don't remember in English, it's like TDA or something like that, which means hyperactivity in children, which it's like well documented that can be a bit over-reported. So okay, so here we will try to explore this misreporting in a type of data which is the number of visits to the different health systems in private companies. Okay, so the hypothesis is pretty simple. So we think that due to the COVID pandemic, and especially in the first months where we were locked down, like the many number of visits in different health services like oncology, obstetrics, things like that, were postponed because they were considered at that time that were not super relevant. That's something that we can discuss, but that was what happened. And then when we passed this, like the worst months of the pandemic, then all these visits were, in some cases, several cases in the future. So we expect to observe an exceed number of cases nowadays, basically. So we expect to observe over-reporting somehow compared to what we had in the past. That's basically the idea. So our data is what I said, is a weekly number of visits for different health services. When I say health services, means like, I don't know, what I said, oncology, general medicine, things like that. So we have the data disaggregated by Spanish provinces. We focused right now in these health services: urology, oncology, obstetrics, general medicine, osteopathy, and cardiology. And we have also data by age and gender, which is pretty important as well. So this is, for instance, an example of what I tried to explain before. So this is basically the number of visits of obstetrics in females Barcelona. So what we have, oh, this doesn't work. Okay, what we have here is what happened during the first months of the pandemic. Then, so it's clear that we have a lower number of visits here. Then it went up, and here we expect to observe some of the visits that had to be done here. Okay, so we expect to observe here a quite of over-reporting in our time series. So what is the model? So the model is pretty simple. It's a model of a time series of integer valued random variables. And this is a really simple model, which is called inner one model, which is like the integer valued version of the autoregressive one model. What it means that? Means that we have a kind of dependence. Here we have what we call the binomial thinning operator to ensure the discreteness of the process. And here we have what we call the innovation, which is a count allow probability. In our case, it's simple, it's the Poisson distribution. Okay, so I will consider in my model that I have an observed process, which I will call xn, and I will have, I have a hidden process that I call xn, and an observed process that I call yn, okay? So my hidden process is this inner model, which is like similar to an R1 model in the continuous case. And then I have an observed process, which is with probability 1 minus omega is what happens in reality, and with probability omega is a kind of operator of what happens in reality. And this kind of operator here, this is like 2 parameters, is what you have here. It's like the random sum of these random variables, and these random variables are basically defined by this PMF. Okay, so basically what I have, this random variable can just take 0, 0, 1, and 2 with these probabilities and 0 otherwise. So what it means that now I have a really simple type of overreporting, which the maximum that I can have as an overreporting is double of what actually is happening. But this can be also generalized to other random variables here. Okay, so this model allows to estimate underreporting, no misreporting, and overreporting depending on the estimates of parameters phi1, phi2. If these estimates are lower than 1, I have under. If they are near to 1, they are no misreporting, and if they are over 1, I have overreporting. Okay, so how can I estimate the parameters of the model? I have basically 2 methods. The first one is like method of moments with sample moments, and it's pretty simple. If I know the distribution of my observed process, which basically is a mixture of a Poisson and Hermite distribution and second order Hermite distribution, then I can basically fit this mixture, estimate these parameters with the autocorrelation function of the observed process. I can estimate the alpha parameter, and finally, with these estimates, I can get the estimate for the lambda. Okay, but the method of moments, as always, is very limited, and sometimes it doesn't work really well. And for estimating the standard errors, maybe I need to do bootstrap or something like that. So I have another method which is more convenient, which is, of course, the maximum likelihood method. And what we need to do to compute the likelihood function is to use techniques of hidden Markov models, because what we have is a hidden Markov model with an infinite number of states, which means that the likelihood function is not directly tractable. It's like really complicated. So I need to use some type of algorithm to compute the likelihood function, in this case the forward algorithm. And basically it's really simple. The forward algorithm depends on what is called the forward probabilities, and they are computed recursively. Okay? And these forward probabilities are essentially depend on the emission and transition probabilities. So if we can define these two, we can calculate the likelihood function really, let's say, easily. So this is basically my model. This is my, it doesn't work. I have my hidden process, my observed process. I have my transition probabilities, which defines basically the structure of the time series. And then for each state, I have the emission probability. And I said before that I had a hidden Markov chain with an infinite number of states, because here in the hidden process I can have the, so because I can have infinite number of different combinations, okay? So I define here the transition probabilities are really easily defined with the PMF of the inner model. So this is like really simple, and the emission probabilities are defined here for different cases depending on if I have over, under, and things like that. And this depends on this PN, which is computed recursively with this expression. And this expression was found with the result of a paper that I forgot to put here of Puig and Mirabete in probability letters. So I can just give you more details if you are interested. Okay, let's go, sorry. So as I said before, we have the model, but now we are with the simulation study plus trying to get results from our data. So we started with a really naive simulation study based on Monte Carlo. So we simulated different scenarios of over under reporting, basically with different values for the parameters. And we are now, so for instance, here we have an example of simulated process for over-reporting, because this is like this plus twice this is over 1, so we have over-reporting, and basically this is basically the results that we got from the simulation study. So we still have some problems that we have to look at more details, because some parameters we are not covering the coverage that we had to cover, so we are trying to figure out what is happening here. Also, we have an example for underreporting. And as well, we have, for instance, this parameter that the bias is pretty high for what we think. So we are trying to figure out what is happening here. I had to say that this model is computationally really intensive. So to now, we only had 50 simulations, because it's like it takes a lot of time. So we are still getting simulations. So maybe these results will change if we have, of course, more repetitions. And then we have two really naive examples. One, urology males, A Coruña, from June 20 to December 21. So we try to estimate what happens in this period. And the same we have for obstetrics females in Cáceres in a similar period. And this is what we got so far, the estimates for the hidden process and the estimates for the observed process. This is the frequency of underreporting, which seems to be pretty high here. So misreporting, sorry, which seems to be pretty high here. And here, what we have is the estimates related to the parameters related to the misreporting intensity, and it's pretty obvious that in both cases, this is satisfied, or seems to be over-reporting. But as I said before, we are just starting with this. So we have a lot to do here. This is just a really, really, really naive illustration of what we want to do. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, we had time for some questions, one or two. We have my microphone.
Okay. Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi.
So, thank you very much, Amanda, for this. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, same.
The big question is about the goodness of fit. I mean, do you think that your very simplistic Poisson assumption here is sufficient to capture the data? Because if I see your standard errors, some of them are pretty big, so actually...
Yeah, no, definitely. We have to try different alternatives for the innovations of the process, because the Poisson is like really simple, but it's not not really flexible at some point. So maybe we have to consider other distributions, such as the negative binomial or something like different. So it's something that we also considered.
And you said also that you have covariates, so the covariates in the model will enter in the mean of the Poisson.
Exactly, yes, because we have covariates age, gender, and also we have in some cases a kind of periodicity, because in August and Christmas, the number of visits always systematically decrease. So of course we have to include a covariate there, and the idea is to include it in the expectation of the innovations or something like that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Another question? No, done. We can.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now our fifth and final talk will be in an online format by Enrique Calderín Ojeda from the University of Melbourne.
Good morning, everyone. So thank you for allowing me to present virtually online in this important conference. Due to some health problem that I have experienced in the last month, I'm preventing me to travel to Barcelona, but I'm just happy to do my presentation online this morning. Okay, the model I'm going to present here is just basically an extension of a model published in Austin Bulletin this year, and is based on extending or to show how the some derivation, some extension can be completed from this model, okay? And in particular, incorporating some integer value autoregressive model of order 1 with RBL innovations, okay? This is a joint work with Francisco Vázquez, and the outline of this presentation that I'm going to introduce, basically because probably most of you are not familiar with this result in number theory, so I'm going to show some background on the RBL numbers and RBL polynomials, okay? And then we're going to introduce some important properties of the model based on the distribution that arise using the RBL numbers, okay? That is probably related to an existing distribution in the literature. This is the short distribution using accident data back in the 60s, but however, this is another way to derive the function, okay? So we give some particular cases of the model and important properties, some condition to show some important properties of the distribution, in particular, the one that the distribution is bimodal, okay? Could be bimodal. Okay, later we just introduce the in R1 process, okay? Just giving some properties of the model. And then study due to the complexity of the conditional distribution, just to derive an estimation method based on the EM algorithm, okay, an expectation maximization algorithm. Then, I'm going to introduce how to extend the model to the bivariate case and incorporate covariates, okay, in particular the bivariate regression model, but can be also be extended to the multivariate case, in special, particularly using the Sarmanov distribution, okay, and try to fit some actuarial data to the model, okay, to this bivariate regression model and compare with other existing alternatives in the literature. In particular, just make a quick comparison with the bivariate negative binomial, okay, and some small references are included at the end of the presentation, okay. So then it is important to define what are the RBL numbers or generalized Bell numbers, okay? And they are given by this series representation here, denoted by the letter B, and then we have two different entries in the series Y and R. Okay, so these RBL numbers represent the counts of the partition of a set with Y plus R element, such that the
Enrique?
Sorry. Yes.
Excuse me, Enrique. We have a slight problem here. You should be sharing your slides, and for some reason we cannot see them. I would like, we should try it so that we can see your slides.
Okay, can you see my slide now?
No, you have to share your screen.
Okay, I'm going to share again. Now?
Wait a second. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So if you could go back a little bit on your talk, because we were a bit lost now.
Okay, no problem. So
and
we have time, right?
Yes, we do have time until 12:30, 11:30 your time. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I can just discuss everything in just 10-15 minutes. Okay. So the background basically is of the presentation based on the.
Yeah, we could follow that. Thank you, Enrique.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I don't interrupt you anymore. Thank you.
So this is just I move forward to slide 3. Basically, this is the background. So I'm going to introduce here the RBL numbers, okay, or generalized RBL numbers. So this is the notation we use, depends on Y and R, two quantities here, and it's a finite series based on the R Stirling numbers, basically. So this count represents the count of the partition of a set with Y plus R element, such that the first R element are in distinct subset in each partition, okay? So then, based on this number, can be derived the RBL polynomials, okay? Introducing this polynomial representation here in terms of the R Stirling number. Okay, so these results are proved in this work here, in Zeddouk 2011. And then an important, interesting characteristic of the double generating function of the R Stirling number is that we can set up this equation, okay, that allows us to generate a probability mass function. Okay, in particular, we have that using in the series from y equals 0 to infinity of the Arabel polynomials multiplied by this theta to the y divided by y factorial. So we have that the sum converges to the expression on the left-hand side. Okay, and here, well, some properties verified by this Arabel polynomial. Okay, then, based on this representation, a probability mass function can be derived. That is exactly the short distribution introduced in 1967 in the context of accident data. Okay, but the distribution can be also written in terms of this polynomial. Note that the distribution has three parameters. Is obviously discrete distribution and with support in the non-negative integers. Okay, the condition of the parameters, initially we take the r greater than 0, parameter theta greater than 0, and alpha also greater than 0. Okay, it's not shown in the slide, but also there exists the recursive expression for the probability mass function, here labeled as 3. So, and then we have here the three first values of the probability mass function evaluated at 0, 1, and 2. Okay, then important to mention that this distribution that includes as particular case the Neyman type A distribution, also, well, using this parameterization for the alpha, okay, and also known as the Bell-to-Char distribution in the literature, and also two other distributions are obtained. So, for example, for the case that r is equal to 0 and the alpha in the polynomial is equal to 1, so then the distribution is a one-parameter distribution that can be written in terms of the Bell distribution. Okay, and obviously taking here r equal 1 and alpha equals 0, so we obtain as a particular case also the boson distribution. Okay, in practice, if we use this distribution to model count data, especially with a high proportion of zeros and a long right tail, the distribution has better performance than, for example, the negative binomial beta, another competitive distribution with three parameters, or also known as the generalized Waring distribution. Okay, so then, based on this distribution, we're going to see two important properties. The first one is that the distribution can be strongly unimodal or bimodal, depending on the certain combination of the parameters. So, for example, the condition for the short distribution here, or RBL, depending on the parameters, to be bimodal, is given by these restrictions on the parameter r, alpha, and theta. Okay, in the common intersection for these values, so the distribution can be bimodal, and in practice, fitting the model is able to capture bimodality. Okay. Also, well, some properties that allows us to derive the moments. Okay, it's based on for example, the expression for the cumulant generating function, the CGF. That, of course, by exponentiating this function, we obtain the moment generating function, and from the moment generating function, we can obtain the mean and the variance of the model. Okay, so observe that here the variance is greater than the mean. Okay. Then we use this distribution. Okay, after a parametrization in terms of the expression of the mean and the variance here. So in terms of the mean, so we can just reparameterize the distribution in terms of the mean. Okay, that is useful, for example, to derive a regression model, and the expression is given at the top of the slide. Okay, and then from this expression we can derive an integer value autoregressive model of order 1. Okay. Process that is defined in this traditional form. Okay, here in this equation, so P is a probability value, takes the values in 0, 1, and the circle here for this operation, this operator, sorry, is just the binomial thinning operator. Okay, such that if Z is non-negative integer value random variable, So then we have that this operator here give us the binomial distribution with the parameters obviously Z and P, since each one of these BK is a Bernoulli distribution, okay? And the innovation term here is taken in this form, okay? It's just obtained from this parameterization of the short distribution. Okay, then we can derive just the transition probability. Okay, this is the expression if we just try to study the probability of the process being in the state set t, given that in the previous period of time was in set t minus 1. Okay, and the expression is, of course, using the binomial thinning operator, is just given in this way, where this py here is just the expression of the probability mass function given in terms of this parameterization, okay, in terms of the mean. Some properties of this integer value autoregressive process of order 1, okay, are given in this slide. So we have expression for this conditional expectation, just the unconditional mean just of the process, okay, the conditional variance, the variance, and also we have just the covariance with the lag equal h and also the correlation, okay? And the index of dispersion of the process is greater than 1, so the process is over dispersed. Okay, in terms of the estimation, this is not is not used in practice in this presentation, but of course parameters can be estimated by conditional maximum likelihood estimation, using, for example, the previous expression for the transitional probabilities. However, here I'm giving an alternative procedure based on the expectation maximization algorithm, okay? And here, for that, we assume that we have n times t observations, where we have I just is the sample size and t just the period of time, moving from 1 to capital T. Let us also suppose that we observe latent variables, okay, VIT, again, depending on I and T, from the random variable obtained by this, applying here the operator, okay, the thinning operator, P, using this C, set I T minus 1. Okay, then from this expression, we can obtain the complete likelihood functions to estimate just the parameter of the model, just the vector parameter denoted here by capital theta, okay? And expression for the log likelihood, for the complete likelihood function are given here, where, of course, this is just the log of the innovation term at ZIT minus VIT, okay, just the latent value. Okay, based on this complete likelihood function and evaluating a certain function here, capital Q, at the parameter theta that depends, of course, of the previous observations, assuming that the parameter has been estimated. So in iteration k, so in iteration k plus 1, we have this function that depends on the observation and also on the latent variables. Okay, so then taking expectation for this complete likelihood function, so we just compute the following expectations, okay? In particular, the expectation of VIT, okay, which of course can be obtained here a closed-form expression for this expectation. And also just this moment that depends on this, the log of this Arbel polynomial evaluated at here, taking as y, just the value ZIT minus VIT with the previous values in the iteration k. Of course, this is a series representation, so this moment in practice can be used using the series approximation and approximating from a numerical point of view. And then in the M step, just using these pseudo values, okay, we proceed to maximize the function Q an update for the 4 parameters of the model. Okay, so with respect to the parameters. So then, as I mentioned here, I haven't implemented this in practice, but note that we are using the parameterization in terms of the mean that allows us to derive the regression model. Okay, and using this parameterization in the final part of this talk, okay, I'm going to show that a multivariate distribution can be derived using the Sarmanov distribution, where the response here for dimension 2 takes this form. Okay, we are now 2 random variables, capital Y, I, J. Okay, I is the sample size, J or the sequence of random variables, and J here is just the dimension. Okay, so then this is the response variable, and we have well, in this case, common covariates. Okay, so we are assuming common covariates in the two dimensions. Okay, and for every J from 1 to 2. Okay, and based on for the marginal distribution in the previous representation of the marginal in terms of the mean, so we have that the conditional the marginal, okay, depending on the covariate, this expectation is equal to the mean that can be modeled in terms of the log-link function, okay, just to guarantee the positive response for the mean, and where this underlying beta j is the column vector of the regressors, okay? Then, of course, we just reparameterize the distribution using this transformation in terms of the means, okay, of the marginal means. And then the probability mass function of this bivariate distribution using the Sarmanov family is given by this common expression where we have the product of the marginal plus, multiplied by this 1 plus omega multiplied by these 2 expressions that we have here. Okay, so here just in practice the difficulties to estimate the parameter omega, but for this model this can be done smoothly. Okay, so no problem in the estimation of the parameter. Of course, here we just calculate this expectation, expectations to the e to the negative y to the j, and the parameter omega is the dependency parameter that is initially just takes real values, but we are going to see that this is a bounded interval for that. In the case that omega is 0, so we have that the pair of the random variable are independent and positive correlation for omega greater than 0 and negative correlation for omega less than 0. So then the omega for all across the sample is restricted to this interval. Now that depends on y, and we have the lower limit and the upper limit. This is known for most of you. So then in practice, when we perform the estimation, since each interval depends on the individual expectations, so the interval for omega differ for each I. Okay, so then we in practice guarantee that the omega falls in all the intervals here. And the log likelihood function of the previous example is given like by this expression. Of course, estimation can be done easily. In this case, was carried out using Mathematica software, and in particular, it was applied to this popular data set in the CAS dataset R package, including the whole sample size. Okay, just we estimate the parameters based on the whole set. In particular, for this data set, is the sample size is more than 30,000 policies. Okay, for response variable, we consider 2 types of claims. In particular, the number of out-of-use claims and the number of parking claims, and taking this list of explanatory variables. So most of them just taking indicators, or but we have just this is just related. Okay, the explanation for those explanatory variables. Okay, and then in the estimate, so well, the results are given here. Note that the estimate for, well, 1 star in the estimate denotes that is significant at the 5% significant level. And the estimate of the parameter omega is just given here, is also significant. Okay? And in particular here, the model was compared in terms of some measure of model selection, well, shown here. And as can be seen in terms of those measures of model selection, the value of the different measures of model selection here, negative of log likelihood, aggregate information criterion, and BIC, just tell us that the fit is better for the bivariate version of the R-Bell distribution, as is expected for the extra parameter. Okay. Also, in practice, some more measures of model selection were conducted for this, but due to the time constraint for this presentation, so I'm going to stop here, and some references are shown in this final slide. Okay.
Really, we had 10 minutes for questions. If some then if some people want to ask something, we have that time. Okay. The microphone.
Thanks for the talk. So my question is, I think it's really not, like, it's more something that I'm curious. So you presented the inner model and with the innovations using this R-Bell distribution. I was wondering if you have a closed form or known distribution for the marginal distribution. I mean, if you have a closed form for the probability distribution of the CED process, if you specify a binomial thinning operator plus R-Bell distribution.
For the innovation, well, you mean for the estimation? For the estimation?
No, I mean that if you, so in the classical inner one process with Poisson, if you specify the binomial thinning operator plus the Poisson as innovation, then the marginal distribution of the process is known and is Poisson. And this is really a good property because it's really, it makes the model really easy to use. But if you change the distribution of the innovation, sometimes you don't have a closed form for the marginal distribution. And I was wondering if in your case, using this binomial thinning operator plus the R-Bell distribution, if you have a closed form or a way, an easy way to find the marginal distribution of the process, or if you know the marginal distribution of the process. That's the question.
It's just the transition probabilities and the joint distribution, but there are no closed form expression for that.
Okay.
I mean, it just can be handled numerically, and so that's how I present for the estimation the expectation maximization, because it's just the model is tractable in terms of approximating the conditional expectations.
Okay. Thank you. That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Then, when I have a question, but I'm working now also with the Salmanov distribution, and then I think taking into account the limits of the dependency parameter, you will be able to evaluate the limits of the correlation or something.
Yes, numerically, yes.
Yeah.
And the omega is, I mean, across this observation was tested for each sample observation that the omega just falls below inside the interval of interest. So then in terms of the convergences and computational time, the model has a similar performance in times, I mean, at least in Mathematica, and the code I'm using is similar to negative binomial in terms of computational times, and so for dimension 2, of course, extending the dimension, I haven't done.
Yeah, but omega don't have a easy interpretation. But I ask for if you can to relate omega with some dependency, some correlation measure. For
well, yes, it's not shown in the slide, but it can be. I mean, we have an analytical expression for the correlation.
Okay.
So then it can be calculated. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? No? Then thank you very much. And
okay, and thank you for allowing me to present online this morning. Okay.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, then we have finished the first session. Okay, thank you to everyone.